Okay, here we go. It's just taking a bit to wake up. It is very early here. I can understand. I didn't want to get up either. Okay, so take two. Welcome to Toys to Life Week. Day one is going to be Disney Infinity. Now you're probably asking, what is Disney Infinity? Well, once the slides click over because they've slowed down. There we go. I thought I just fixed you. Come on, what are you doing to me? Okay, so what is Disney Infinity? Well, it's an adventure game from Disney that's split between the playsets and the toy box. The playsets are based around the Disney franchises, and eventually they go on to be Marvel and Star Wars as well. And they cover a whole bunch of different genres. Like you've got the Lone Ranger one, which was basically kid-friendly Red Dead Redemption. You've got the Cars one, which is racing. The Star Wars are kind of like open-world adventure ones. And then you've got platformers like the Inside Out and Finding Dory ones. So there's a whole bunch of different things on offer, and it's really exciting. Then there's the Toybox Mode, which is basically what it says on the tin. You know, it's a toy box. You can throw in anything you want. But it's not just being able to build things using the tools you unlock in the different worlds. It's actually a whole creation suite. So you can make your own mini games and adventures and that kind of thing with some surprisingly robust logic tools. You used to be able to share them online and play everybody else's that they made, but now that the game's been discontinued, they've taken the servers offline, unfortunately. But you can still make stuff, so not the end of the world. Just the end of everyone else's worlds being able to come to your world. So yeah, like I said, it started with just Disney. The first game was all Disney and Pixar stuff. Then the second game introduced Marvel, and the third game would focus on Star Wars. Over time, they allowed a bit more crossover stuff. That was one thing they had to really push hard against from, the business suits. They really wanted all these things in their firm box. You know, you've got the Disney box, you've got the Marvel box, you've got the Star Wars box. And then in between those, it's like, whoa, Monsters Inc. and Pirates of the Caribbean at the same time. We can't do that. What about the brand, man? Think about the brand. But everyone with a brain is like, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? And they're like, but the brand. Because, marketers, man. Ugh. So the Toys to Life factor came in through the figurines, mostly. So you pop a little figurine on the base, and that will let you play as that character. The figurines are really cool. They managed to make a really nice art style that makes every character kind of blend in, while also allowing them to make a firm and sturdy toy. Because the thing with Amiibo, like, they're definitely the best looking Toys to Life figures. But if a kid plays with pretty much any of those, they're going to snap in half. Beg your pardon. The Disney Infinity ones are really sturdy and chunky. They can go through a hell of a beating. The only ones you kind of really got to worry about is the Star Wars ones with their lightsabers. They can snap really easy. And then there were other pieces you can put on the base, which will unlock things like the playsets themselves, alternate costumes for the characters, accessories you can use, and all that sort of thing. You want to see your boy Donald Duck? We'll see how it goes. There is a Donald Duck figure, so we might better get him in there. So the Disney Infinity series... Let me start again. Now, the Disney Infinity series started, obviously, with Toy Story 3. Wait, what? Well, Toy Story 3 was actually basically the start of the blueprint that would go on to be used in Disney Infinity. A lot of the mechanics transferred over, and it also had what was the first Toybox Mode. In this mode, you would unlock toys and buildings and things which you could place into the Toy Story world, and you kind of played through the representation of Andy's imagination. So at the beginning of Toy Story 3, when, there's like this epic scene where Woody's chasing after the train and then Rex shows up and he's a giant dinosaur and eating things. So that's kind of what you're playing through in the Toybox Mode. So you put down the toys and they become real. Almost as if the toys are coming to life, huh? And it had a bit of crossover stuff too. So there was like a Haunted Mansion level. Some other, I can't actually remember what was in it, but it was basically proto Disney Infinity. A lot of the mechanics and items did actually transfer over. After Toy Story 3's Toybox Mode proved popular, Disney were like, "Hey, look at that Skylanders thing. Do you reckon you can do that, but with us?" And the developers were like, "Well, we kind of started it. I'm sure we can work something out." And then that led into Disney Infinity. Woo! So the first game was all Disney. Marvel and Star Wars weren't in there yet. Although there was a fun little Easter egg if you bought every character where you could actually unlock a lightsaber to use. And that was blowing people's minds. I can't remember if that was the first one or the second one. But one of them had a lightsaber you could unlock. So yeah, the first one was all Disney. The starter set gave you 3 worlds. It gave you access to the Pirates of the Caribbean, the Monsters Inc., and the Incredibles world. And you got 1 character from each of those. And you could also play with them in the Toybox Mode. The one problem with this was that you couldn't actually play co-op in any of the play sets because they only let you use characters from that world. So if you wanted to play co-op mode in Pirates of the Caribbean, you'd need to buy Barbossa or Davy Jones. Monsters Inc., you'd need Randall or Mike. And Incredibles, you'd need any of like 6 figures. I think there was for that one. There was a lot. So that did annoy people that you had to pay so much extra for to let your kids play together and shut them up for a few hours. So they would go on to fix that in the second game. The first game's mechanics were quite simple. There wasn't the robust combat that you'd see later on, but it did branch a whole bunch of genres. Like I was saying before, you've got like Lone Ranger, which was pretty much kid-friendly Red Dead Redemption. You had... What is Cars was the racing one. And Pirates of the Caribbean was kind of like kid-friendly Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. It was pretty wild. And then, of course, you had the Toybox Mode where you could throw everything together. There were no restrictions there, so you could have characters from all the different worlds showing up. And as you'd play through the playsets, you'd unlock new tools to use in there. So going on from that, we got to Disney Infinity 2.0. And the focus for that was Marvel superheroes. They learned their lesson about the co-op play from last time. So this time you only got 1 playset, but you got 3 characters from the 1 playset. And so you could play co-op play right away. The problem with 2.0 I found... Oh, the Cars one was really fun. So the problem with 2.0 was that it pretty much had a pure Marvel focus. There were less playsets. They were a bit samey, and it was a bit disappointing like that. So there were 3 playsets, an Avengers, a Spider-Man, and a Guardians of the Galaxy. The Avengers and Spider-Man one were both set in different parts of New York. So they felt really samey. It was mostly just the enemy types that were different. The Guardians one was a bit more varied than those. But it wasn't as big an open world like the other ones. It was a bit more of a hub-based platformer, I guess you'd say. There was Disney content in the game, but there wasn't a lot you could actually do with it because all the playsets were Marvel. So they did actually release a cheaper version later on for people who went into Marvel. It gave you Stitch and Merida, but no playsets. So one thing they did try to do to try to give a bit more variety was something called Toybox Games. Those are the... Have I got my mouse here? I think that's on the screen, yeah. So I've got these little discs here. Which would unlock a dungeon crawler and a tower defense game, I think they were. So there were Marvel and Disney themed ones, but the Marvel one only let you use Marvel characters, the Disney one only let you use Disney characters. And so the one matching your starter set came in already, and then you'd have to buy the others separately. But it was a big criticism that you bought all these Disney figures, and unless you wanted to actually build stuff in the toy box, not a lot you could actually do with it. But it led us into Disney Infinity 3.0. And that's cut off. I probably should have checked to see how this actually fit on the screen. Hey, let's shrink you down a little bit. There we go. There we go. That's all right. That's all right. So the focus of Disney Infinity 3.0 was Star Wars, but unlike 2.0, it had stuff from Marvel and Disney in as well. 3.0 was the peak of the series, I would say, because there was just so much in there. Like you had a playset for each of the 3 different Star Wars eras. So you had the prequels, the originals, and the sequels. You had a new Marvel playset, which was basically like Power Stone, but with Marvel. And there were 2 Disney playsets, both platformers, an Inside Out one, and a Finding Dory one. And on top of that, they expanded the toy box, so it had a whole bunch of pre-made games and things you could play in there. So you can chuck any of your characters in and just have some fun there. One of those is the hub area, which we'll be taking a look at in a sec. It's more than just a tutorial space. It's kind of just a pre-built play area, I guess you could say. And there's fun events that get triggered every now and then. And as you play through the play sets, it actually puts kind of monuments to your achievements in there. It's very cool. They also expanded on the idea of Toybox Games. So you had the Dungeon Crawler one returned, but with much more care, I guess, put into it. It's more... The first one felt very kind of procedurally generated. I think it actually might have been, I'm not sure. But this one, they had these very handcrafted levels, a bit of a story, and there was stuff from Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars all in it. And so there's this little story you play through where Syndrome from The Incredibles steals the wand that the player uses to create stuff, and then ends up taking over all the different worlds. So you got to go through each world, fight off bosses, get gear and stuff. It's very cool. It's actually a better loot-based game than a certain other game using a Disney license at the moment, if you ask me, because the gear does stuff and gives you fun abilities. There's also a racing mode, which was made by Sumo Digital, I think, who I'm pretty sure were the ones who did the Sonic racing games. So that was pretty incredible. It wasn't as polished as those games because the racing mechanics in this are a little funky at times, but the imagination put into the track design was definitely very Sumo. And it was pretty wild because you could use any of the vehicles that you unlocked from the playsets of the toy box, or if you used a power disc, which is an extra toy that adds in accessories and stuff, and that had a vehicle, you could use that. So you could use pretty much anything from like the Electric Mayhem bus from the Muppets, or Anakin's pod racer from Star Wars. I think the Spider-Mobile is one of them as well. It's pretty fun. So, actually, this leads into the next slide. So what was cool about it? It was quality Disney licensed stuff. So it was the kind of thing that kids can jump into and have fun with. But it had a deeper level that you can get into if you're a big boy like me. And there was such a big variety as well. So like I was saying before, you've got like open world stuff, you've got platformers, you've got racing, you've got dungeon crawlers, you can build your own stuff. It's just so much there and it's very cool. The toy box tools themselves are very powerful. You could make spaces that were just nice to live in. Like I know Anna used to always spend her time building an Elsa's castle from Frozen over and over. So you can just build stuff. Or if you want to get into it at a deeper level, again, you know, for the big boys and girls, you can make more complex stuff. So it's got logic tools. You can pretty much make games in it. Like there's going to be limitations, of course, and you can't ship them anywhere afterwards. But that's how powerful they were. And over time, the mechanics got really fleshed out, and the playsets became amazing games in their own right. So they got some real all-star developers working on this stuff. Like Ninja Theory was doing the combat. So you'll see later on that it's definitely verging on the boundaries of character action. They had Sumo Digital doing some of the racing stuff. Who else did they have? I'm trying to remember. They had United Front Games, I think, doing the Force Awakens and Marvel stuff. And Studio Gobo was doing some most of the more open worldy stuff. So they had all these developers doing what they were best at, and it led to this really cool game. So what went wrong? Well, in a word, corporate. I mean, I joke, but to be fair, that was kind of the big thing. The other Toys to Life games I'll be looking at had some clear issues in the design and the monetization, which we'll go over later. But the one thing that was different, I think, about Disney Infinity was that the developers were actually listening to feedback and they knew what people wanted. It's just they weren't always allowed to do it. Like I said before, people didn't like that they had to pay extra to play co-op in the first game. So for the second game, they were like, well, hey, we're giving you enough characters to play cooperative mode right from the beginning. And people got a bit tired of the blind box method that they used for some of the toys that you could buy. Because you basically had to buy these kind of like booster packs that would have extra items in them, but you didn't know what was inside. So you'd end up with heaps of duplicates. I've got so many duplicates. So they were like, okay, well, from now on, we're still going to have those, but you know which ones you're buying. We're going to release them in themed sets. So they were like a Star Wars set, I think a Tomorrowland set, a Good Dinosaur set, you know, stuff tying in with all the movies that were going around. Pancake, hey, how you doing? We're going over Disney Infinity at the moment. Then we're going to jump into the game. And the suits made some really dumb decisions. Like, when you think of a Disney game that brings in all the Disney icons, you'd think that, you know, they'd want to throw in all the iconic Disney characters, you know, Mickey Mouse, Goofy, Donald Duck, the princesses. But the suits really thought that they could kind of tell people what they want. So they tried to plug all the things that they wanted the people to like, rather than going with what people wanted to play as. And to a degree, that's good. I mean, like, if you're releasing a new movie, chances are it's going to be popular and people will want to play a game from it. But they just got really weird about it. Like, the first game, they had space, or they had the resources left for basically one more playset. And so it was coming down to Frozen, the hit phenomenon that took over the world, or Frankenweenie. And to be fair, Frozen hadn't become the phenomenon it was yet. But you had a Disney princess movie, or Frankenweenie. And spoilers, they told him to make a Frankenweenie playset. And the developers are like, okay. And so they started making a Frankenweenie playset. And so Frankenweenie would go on to bomb, and Frozen would go on to make, I don't even know how much money. I don't want to think about it. It'll make me sad. But then the suits were like, oh, why'd you waste all this time with Frankenweenie? That's not going to sell, can it? And so all the hard work they put in on this thing, they had to scrap in the end. And it's like, surely that would have been obvious to begin with. And there's actually an infamous story in a Kotaku article about some of the things that were planned for Disney Infinity going forwards before they had to discontinue the line. And basically, the suits had no idea about, you know, what people wanted. And you can see, like, Mickey Mouse in his traditional animated form wasn't even added till the third game. And it was really hard to even add, like, the princesses and that. And most of those didn't get added to the third game either. And even then, some of them ended up getting kind of their live action designs. Like Alice in Wonderland stuff was based off the Tim Burton stuff. They were planning Belle and Beast, but again, it was the live action, not the animated stuff everyone liked. But the really funny story that always gets me is that the developers were planning out, which characters were going to get the big focus, which ones were going to have their figures ordered in bulk and all that kind of thing. And so the suits were like, all right, you know what the kids are going to love? They're going to love Yondu, the blue guy from Guardians of the Galaxy. And everyone's like, shouldn't we order heaps of characters like, the Hulk, the really popular guy, had a cartoon series, is in the MCU, Hulk smash, kids love. No, kid, you got a lot to learn about this business. The kids are going to love it. Yondu, the blue guy. And so they just ordered this mass of Yondu figurines, and they would just sit on the shelves and rot away in the warehouses because no one was buying them because it's Yondu. And it was just so funny. And it was just these dumb decisions like that made things cost way more than they should have, because people weren't listening to the people who made the game and knew what people wanted. It was really hard for them to even get any of the crossover stuff. They kind of had to justify it to the suits by being like, oh no, but see, Monsters Inc. and Pirates of the Caribbean aren't actually being set in the same world. It's like a kid is getting their toys of Jack Sparrow and Sully and putting them in their play area, you know? They're not the real characters, they're just toys. And the suits are like, oh, okay. Well, see, everything I saw I was going to not sign off on, but because you said they're toys, that makes it okay. And so it kind of hit its stride in the third game when corporate took their hands off a bit and they were able to make whatever they wanted. Oh, not everything they wanted, but you know, more freedom. And with the fourth game, that they were actually, I'll talk about it on the next slide because we're going to talk about stuff that's coming later. But effectively, they were going to go all in on the crossover stuff because they finally justified to corporate that it would be good. So what's the legacy of Disney Infinity? It marked the end of an era for Disney's video game projects. Every few years, Disney jumps into the video game business and they're like, hey, we're going to take it seriously this time. And then when they don't make $1 billion from a single game, they're like, oh, what is this? Fuck this. Oh. And they spend all this time building up this big team of developers and everyone. And they're like, all right, bye. Just kick them to the curb. But this time it really did kind of feel like a final thing. Because Disney were like, we don't want to spend money on making games. We can just make money from giving people our name. And they can make the games. And that led to wonderful things like Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Marvel's Avengers. Like, they really don't have quality control in the way that matters. They're like, oh, okay, make sure you're adhering to the brand guidelines. Like, if this lightsaber swings a millisecond faster than it should in real life, or if Iron Man wears a costume he's never worn in the comics, we'll fucking get you. But you make a bad game, and well, we don't really care about that. So you can still buy the games on PC, on Steam. 1 and 2 are feature complete. They have everything available digitally, all the accessories, all the figurines, all the levels. 3.0 is mostly complete, but it never got updated with some of the stuff that came later on. So if you want the feature complete version, you're going to have to try and track down the PS4 or Xbox One version plus all the toys. So good luck. It's really disappointing that it never got updated because it means you're missing out on the Marvel playset, the Finding Dory playset, and a whole bunch of extra characters. It's still pretty good to play. More than pretty good. It's a bummer knowing that there's stuff that you'll never be able to play on there. And when the game was discontinued, like I was saying before, the level sharing is offline, which really sucks because people made some really cool levels that you can't play anymore. And you can't actually add text into your toy boxes anymore. If you try to add any text or dialogue, it tries to authenticate it on the servers to make sure there's no rude words in there. But there's no server anymore, so you can't add any dialogue, which is fun. The Disney Infinity line would go on to live a little in the Toybox line of figures. This was basically Disney just ripping the assets from the game and selling it as figurines, but like articulated and stuff. There's mixed results because some are built with the actual assets from the game. Like you can see some of the Star Wars ones down there. But some of them, they tried making new figurines in the style. And some of them didn't turn out the best. They kind of look a bit weird. But, you know, it kind of goes to show how good the Disney Infinity art style was, that Disney would base the whole toy line around it. And they should bring it back. So the developers' plans for the future of Disney Infinity have been leaked by a number of sources. The best one I would go to would be Infinity Adventures on YouTube. And also that Kotaku article I was mentioning before. I can post a link to that later probably. But they go over some of the really, really cool stuff that we'll never get, and it pains me. Like Disney Infinity 3.0 was going to get a Rogue One playset, a Moana playset, and a line of premium figures that were going to be like freaking massive. But you put them on the base and they light up and make noises and stuff, and it's going to be really cool. And Disney Infinity 4.0, some of the plans for that were also leaked. And they actually got the go-ahead to make a full crossover story. So, you know, characters from each world were going to show up in the other ones. You team up to fight villains from each movie and all that kind of thing. And it was really annoying because they really hit their stride with 3.0, and not only found what people wanted, but they were able to flush out the game mechanics and get a bit more freedom from the business suits, and were able to make something really special. I still get really disappointed whenever a new Disney movie comes out, or a TV show, like anything Disney. I just sit there going, man, that would have been so fun to play as Disney Infinity. Especially with the stuff that got leaked. Like knowing that we could have had Rogue One characters, Moana characters, Doctor Strange, a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, what could have been. But yeah, I love Disney Infinity. It was a really wonderful project that didn't really get the attention that it could have. And I think a part of that is because it was so expensive. But I think people did write it off thinking it was just a kid's game. But as we're going to see, it's actually really cool. So we're going to jump in to Disney Infinity 3.0.